let's get into the postmortem of the World Series. Dodgers win it 4-3. You all know the rest of the story, but we'll break it down next on Beyond the Locker Room. Dodgers win the World Series 4-3 in a dramatic, shocking in some ways result. They win it 5-4 in extra innings in Game 7 in Toronto. Full disclosure, I think some of y'all already know, but I'm a Blue Jays fan, and we are going to get into what, at least what I think is some of the downfalls of what happened in this series for the Jays. So let's first go into the Dodgers. Let's give them their due. I think overall, the Dodgers found ways to scratch out victories, and that's what champions do. They figure out ways to keep themselves in games when, quite honestly, in some ways they had no business being in certain games. But that's the mark of a champion. They find ways when they don't have their A game to stick with it. I think Roberts, from a managerial standpoint, full credit. I think he pulled all the right strings. Rely on the guys that you need to, and put those guys in the position they had to be in to kind of try to close it for him. And what I mean by that is just a couple, just for example. The obvious one is Yamamoto. Having him available, and props to him, first thing, man. I mean, that was an old school type of pitching performance. He deserved the MVP. He was the most, I would say the most dangerous Dodger out there, and I have the other one in this case here we'll get to in a second. But Yamamoto, in my mind, pitched one of those classic performances that you see for a pitcher. You don't see quite often in the modern day baseball now, with so much protection on how to manage arms and how to manage, the bullpen and managing starters. There's a lot of coddling, you should say, with pitchers nowadays. And Yamamoto, in a way, he has a mindset of an old school pitcher, not just from the standpoint of how much he's willing to throw, and he's always ready, but also from the mindset. And I will say this overall from the Dodgers' perspective, how their pitchers approach the game. They are very aggressive, and we saw that, they're aggressive on getting the inside the plate, and we saw how that played out in Game 7 where we almost had a brawl. Burlesque, I can't never pronounce his name, so my apologies to his family. But he threw a pitch. He threw 3 straight, really up in on IFK and IKF, and I think I don't know, was it on purpose? You would think not likely in Game 7 with all the marbles on the line, but it was real suspect that it's like 3 times, and it's like you hit him the 3rd time. It was a pretty dangerous pitch too. So I can understand, IKF kind of getting upset, saying like, what the heck, what the hell are you doing? Fortunately, no one got tossed out, anything like that. It didn't have any impact on the game. And at least it didn't have an impact on the game, I'd say, on a physical standpoint where someone got tossed out of the game or anything like that. I do wonder a little bit if it had a change in the game mentally, because after that point, the Dodgers seemed to be really, I thought they might tend to be less aggressive. I think overall their approach on everything, they were more aggressive, and they just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. The Jays were able to scratch out a 4th run late in the game, but obviously that wasn't enough. So Yamamoto, full props to him. As I said before, he's got that old school mentality. He's not backing down for anybody. He's definitely trying to command the inside of the plate as well as a lot of the other Dodger pitchers. I will say this too. It's the best performance. I was saying so before he had even finished completing his innings in Game 7. That is the best performance I've seen of a pitcher since Jack Morris and the Twins, I believe in '87. Where pretty much that pitcher, you have to kind of find a way to work around that pitcher and get around that pitcher, because he was all up in the Blue Jays' heads throughout this series. He is the one pitcher the Blue Jays could not figure out. He has about 4 pitches or so, and maybe 5, and he figured out how to throw all of them effectively. I think the key thing that he did, and I think some of the other Dodgers pitchers realized this by Game 6, which is, I'm not sure to give him credit or the actual Dodgers staff, but it might be a combination. He never actually relied on the fastball to get folks out. And why is that important? And I think the Attell was actually after Game 6 or after Game 5. Yeah, I think when Snell he got rocked in game 5, and he was sounding like a bit of sour grapes. But he mentioned the term in this case, and in baseball terms you hear about it, about that the Jays batters, he wasn't giving a lot of credence and credit to the Jays batting lineup as very talented outside of Vladdy. You might have forgotten about Bichette in this case here, but I think you get his point. I think what he was, he mentioned this term about, all they do really is, essentially paraphrasing, is ambush the fastball. Paraphrasing. And what he's saying about that is that pretty much they're just sitting on fastballs, which is another way of saying it. So there's not anything, he doesn't see it as any sort of great skill. They're just sitting on fastballs. And for most of the first 5 games, I think, with the exception of Yamamoto, the Dodger pitchers were relying on the fastball as the get out of jail pitch, which a lot of pitchers do. But the Jays were ready for it. The Jays were sitting there waiting for it. And Yamamoto had taken a different approach, where he was using his curveball at times and his splitter as the get out of jail pitch, and kind of get him out of trouble because he felt confident throwing them around or in the strike zone. And the Jays were sitting around waiting for fastballs. He wasn't giving them any. I think at one point when the broadcast, I think it might have been the Fox broadcast I was listening to in game 2 when he pitched. Boy, it seems so long ago. Game 2, yeah, because it was in Toronto. He said, I think, I can't remember, Smoltz was making the comment, but I think after about 3 or 4 innings, he had mentioned how pretty much the pitch he had thrown the least in this case was like the fastball. And he had realized, I guess, watching how the Jays approached the batting, maybe from scouting, watching game 1, he's like, okay, I'm not feeding them a lot of fastballs. It took till about game 6, obviously, till the Dodgers pitchers started doing a lot of the same and trying to carry that across, where they're trying to find other ways to try to, get, have the keep the Blue Jays batters off balance. That's my opinion. Where I think they're pretty effective, on that front for the most part in the last 2 games. I think also, credit to Roberts in this case, Rojas in this case here, late in the series. He brought him in game 6 and game 7, mostly for the glove, but the bat was there too, and obviously he hit the big home run that gave him a chance and gave him life in the top of the 9th. And so that's another great pull in this case here. I thought also he managed the 18-inning game in game 3 better than Schneider did, where his batting lineup, even late in the game, wasn't really touched too much, with the exception of Rojas. I think he came in late in that game, but for the most part, he had kept that lineup for the most part, at least the top 6 or top 7, as is throughout that innings, while the Jays lineup was just a hot mess, where it was like it was going to be difficult for them to string hits together because they had guys all over the place batting out of order, and no protection for guys like Vladdy. So it made it very difficult for the Jays to scratch a run out as time went on in the extra innings. So I said before, Roberts pulled all the moves, to kind of get over the finish line, and credit to them. Credit to the Dodgers. A lot of, they got key hits when needed to. Another dangerous man, which I mentioned, was the Fresh Prince. Said it for game 1, I tweeted it out. Fresh Prince is the danger man. Y'all better be careful. Jays fans, we best be watching out for this man. And throughout the series, he had timely hits. When a lot of the big dogs in this case here were not hitting well for the Dodgers, he was always there to kind of have some timely hits in big games. He was also great at certain points with defensively as well too. Let's face it, he kept his foot on the bag in the bottom of the 9th. This is pretty much essentially saved the World Series for his team and for his side. So Will Smith was everywhere. Obviously, he had the final crushing blow for the Jays with the home run. In extra innings, to win it for the Jays. So, in the 11th. So when you look at it from that perspective, guys that came in were key when they had to be. Roberts pulled a lot of strings, and Yamamoto was outstanding. So all due to the Dodgers on that front. Let's get to the other side. Oh boy, let's get to the other side. Why did the Blue Jays lose this series? Why the Dodgers win it, I just said. Why the Jays lose it. Actually, one more thing on the Dodgers side before we go there. The Dodgers also won almost every close game. Any game that was within a run or two in the last 3 innings of the game, the Dodgers were the team that in this case were likely to win the game. That was something that was concerning me. as the series was prolonging. I didn't like any tight games. So the moment I saw this was going to, obviously Game 7 was likely going to be a close game, was the reason why I was hoping for a fifth run, because I know in this case here how the Jays have been playing, and we'll get to them right now, that was going to be a concern. So why did the Jays lose? You know, they always talk about, like, you got to know the game physically, and you have to understand the game mentally in every sport. Mental mistakes. You always hear the announcers mention the mental mistakes. And throughout this series, the Jays kept on making mental mistakes. Time and time and time again. Let's not go too far back. Let's put it this way. I was mentioning this. This is something that has been a bugaboo in this case for the Jays throughout this. I don't want to really put it as the Vladi Bo era, but that's the for lack of a better term, that's the only way I can say it. That would kind of encompass this time frame. So I'm not putting it on those guys completely. I'm not saying that. I'm saying just more that use that as the time frame. In this era of the Blue Jays, when they've been in postseason play, doesn't matter if it's like a wild card game to up to the World Series. One of the things I've always been just driving me up the wall with this team, and I thought they had got it out their system for the most part, was their mistakes on the base pads. There's a philosophy the Jays have, and I'm not knocking it, because I think overall in sports, aggression helps you win. But you have to have some sort of context, time, score, wherever it might be, of when to be aggressive and how aggressive to be. And what I mean by that is, let's just go back and let's go back to Game 6, tying run at second. Now, Clement hits the ball. It's a shallow little fella. Hernandez comes in charging. Barger is asleep at the wheel. Mind you, it's second and third, by the way, in this case here. Second and third. Now, okay, in this case here, it's 1 out. Fine if he gets it in. What are the three possibilities? One, it's a one-hopper. Hernandez catches it. Okay. Probably this case here, it's hard in this case for the runner on third to actually get home, because the runner on third is probably waiting to see if it actually drops. So by the time he gets there, he's got he's got a late start. It's going to be difficult. That's possible. So that's one possibility. But the second base runner, which is Barger, there's no way he's making third from where Hernandez is. He's going to get tagged out. So there's no room for that for a one hopper. Okay, that's for scenario one. Scenario two. The ball gets past Hernandez. Okay, if the ball gets past Hernandez, everyone's home. Jays win. Yay! Or Jays tie the game. Because it was 3-1. Hey! Okay, great. All right, that scenario happens. That's the scenario. Okay, that's the second scenario. The third scenario is the scenario that happened. He catches the ball. Now, when he catches the ball, he's like midway through in the outfield in this case, which is like a nothing throw for any outfielder. It doesn't matter how weak their arm is. Why are you that far off the second base bag? Because if you think he's going to catch it, you should be near the bag to tag up, which you're not going to tag up from that position, so scrap that. If you think it's a one-hopper, as I mentioned before, you're not getting the third where he is a one-hopper. So you're hoping in this case here, somehow he screws it up so badly that the ball goes all the way back to the fence or something like that. Which of the probabilities, that was probably the lowest probability. And yet you're all hanging out there almost midway through the second and third, and you get tagged out. And game over. Like, that can't happen. Throughout the series, line drives came, I believe, at first base and third base, and guys were getting tagged out time and time again. IK almost got tagged out on one, I think, in Game 5, late in the series, or late in the game. And fortunately for the replay, he got him barely. So definitely, I don't know, maybe this is good Dodger scouting, but they saw in this case how aggressive the Jays were on the base pads, and the Jays did not make the adjustment. Clearly did not make the adjustment. Throughout this series, I think a couple times in this series, the Jays were sent home from the third base coach. We got to question these decisions now. Boom. Out at the plate. I just think that there's a lack of discipline on the base pads that cost them a lot of opportunities. But speaking about costing opportunities, I'll give you this stat. 3 for 17. What is that stat you're asking if you don't know? That is the percentage of times the Jays cashed in on runs in scoring position. 3 for 17. And they had a doozy in the bottom of the ninth with bases loaded. I don't know. Once again, this is what we're talking about, in this case, mental mistakes and being disciplined. I don't know how many times in the series I saw the Jays with guys on second and third or bases loaded with no outs or 1 out and can't get anyone home. And that just can't happen. Cannot happen. Like, I understand that. And I'm sitting here watching this, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, okay, what are we looking at? Why is it this case here? If you're Varsho, you got to get the ball. Sorry, man. You got to do your job, man. You got to find a way to get that ball out of the outfield, man. Get it in the air somehow, some way. Nope, grounder, boom. As we know in this case here, it's going to be like a play that's shown forever that saved the World Series for the Dodgers. It'll be part of Dodger lore. Will Smith barely keeps his toe in the plate, out at the plate. That is something that, like, you can't do that. And then for the next play that happened in this case here, where boom, dribbler out, and we're out in the inning. I believe it was actually no, it's dribbler. My apology. I'll get that in a second. That's in this one, bottom ninth. That was the Clement hit that hit almost to the warning track where Page made that great catch. Fantastic catch, by the way. Unbelievable. That too will be part of Dodger lore. But you gotta find a way to cash in those runs. I'm sorry. Infield in, all that. You cannot let that get away, man. I'm sorry. Too many times in the series, that was the case. Too many times. Undisciplined at bats. Not knowing in this case what the situational, not enough good situational baseball. And that pretty much summed up the first two issues why I think the Jays lost this series. Then the last one is gonna be tough for some people to swallow. They might take heat about this in the comments. I don't know. I don't care. I watch football. I watch baseball and watch sports in this case for decades, and I know a choke when I see a choke. This was a choke. I'm sorry. No ways to say it. On this part here, I can't even not the manager. You can't even put the manager in this case, because if I'm Schneider, and if you had to tell me I had to go in this scenario, the three guys I want in late game innings, if I had my choice, probably were the best three performers leading up to that point in the series, and arguably in the playoffs for us. I would say that as a Jays fan, I would say, okay, Savage, Hoffman, Bieber, and each one of them in order gave up a home run. You can't do that, man. You gotta close the door. The Savage one, okay, we had the buffer, the 2 runs, fair enough, but it puts you in a position that 1 home run or 1 mistake in the ninth inning could cost you. But at the same time, Hoffman gets paid a lot of money for these particular positions, because closers usually don't come in on 10 nothing leads. They come in with a run or 2 up. You're supposed to be built for this situation, and you can't give up a home run to a man that's had 7 home runs all season and is the 9th man in the order. It can't be. That's a choke. I'm sorry. It's a choke. Bieber, unfortunate, same deal. You can't. You got to find a way. I understand you want to put a guy at first, but he's a catcher. He's still not going to be the fastest guy at the base pads. Just make sure you don't put up a ball in this case so you can take the deep. Nope. Screwed up. I don't know much more to say about it, man. It is what it is. It is what it is. You got to close the deal. They didn't close the deal. I will say this. I won't let Schneider get off the hook that easily. And the reason why I say so is, bottom of the 11th, you have to find a way. You have a man on second. Man on third. You have to, I think it was Ernie is on third. And you can see the mindset. And I'm sitting there going like, you know what they're doing, dude. Yamamoto pitches all around Barger. He's down 2-0 in the count. He's like, you could tell, he's like, you know what? I want no part of this. He doesn't even try to pitch anything near the strike zone for the next 2 pitches. Essentially, it was an intentional walk. I would say it was an intentional walk. If he chased something, okay, maybe we're on to something. Barger was disciplined, didn't chase anything. So now we have first and third, 1 out. And who's coming to the plate? statistically the slowest man in baseball, and you bring him up there with one out with a potential double play looking right straight in your eye. At no point Schneider saying, you know what, maybe I'll get the backup catcher. Because also too, Kurt is not a natural guy in my mind to drive the ball in the air as well too. And considering in this case Yamamoto in this case a ton of splitters and a lot of breaking balls that make you hit ground balls, it adds to the problem. And the fact that Kurt in this case, as I said before, is arguably the slowest player in the league. You got to give yourself every chance possible. If that means putting the backup catcher who might have better wheels, if that's the case, so be it. You got to make sure you don't be running that double play because you can see it coming from a mile away. A little dribbler in this case here, the shortstop, boom, 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 second first, play, double play, series over, champions are the Dodgers. Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. I'll say it right now. I checked this case here. I checked the old Google AI or anywhere else, and anyone tell me in the comments by all means. But from what I've seen, in the 2-3-2 format, which is used in basketball in the past and used in baseball, in no scenario of the 2-3-2, when the team that's coming home for the 2 games and leading 3-2, I've seen a scenario yet where I've seen results come up on AI telling me that statistically that has happened in the past. I don't think it's ever happened. We're in a 2-3-2 scenario and you're coming home leading 3 games to 2 with a chance to close it out, not once but twice on your own home court or home field. You give it up the ghost, you give it up the series. I don't think it's ever happened in either of those sports. Maybe there's another sport in this case that does the 2-3-2 format, but baseball and basketball, I've never seen it. So if that's not a choke, I don't know what is. And I think as time goes on, right now, Toronto fans and Canadians, in general, are just in the feel-good mood of like, disappointed, upset, sad, about what happened and so on and so forth, and it's kind of like a form of grief in some ways. But I think as time goes on and we actually see the tumult that's come out of this and see the perspective of it, I think more people might be coming towards what I'm saying, how bad a choke this was. You're up 4-2 in your own park. The night before, you had bases, in this case second and third to tie it, and you bungle it there. You're up 4-2 in your own park, and with your 3 best pitchers of the series, giving up 3 home runs to lose the game in extra innings on your own field, and you lose both games. I'm sorry. I don't know what way to call that. I said before, it's unfortunate, but it leaves a sour taste on what was actually a fantastic season to watch and explore with. Getting kind of back my juices of a kid, being obviously a huge baseball fan, growing up, and obviously your minds and your tastes change. I still watch baseball as well too, but much more casually, as time and life gets in the way. You don't have a chance to consume as much as you used to, especially when it comes to baseball. But it was fun to be kind of back in that chair again. I must admit, I think baseball has its things that some people want to go at it about how long it is, no clock, blah blah. I think the league's done a good job of putting rules, implementing rules that make it a much more entertaining product, and it is. It's kind of feels like the old days. And I will also say it's actually when it comes to drama, high drama, there's very few sports that actually delivers it in the postseason quite like baseball. And that feeling was great to kind of go through it with when your team's in the mix. So thank you, MLB. Thank you to the Toronto Blue Jays for a fantastic season. We'll see what's to come next season. Hopefully they sign that Bo deal. But anyhow, folks, once again, thank you for joining me. As always, you can find me weekly on Basketball Rewind with the fellas. Lots of Raptors talk, check us out there. But you can also find me here at Beyond the Locker Room. Once again, you can like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate the support. And I'll check you all later. Peace.